Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Feeling Thursday Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. King of Fighters. Today is a day for checking what improvements ended up being made from playing different games. Mostly DNF Duel, because that is what has been the main thing people have been working on for a while now. That game requires a much larger focus on how to use your meter and the meter available, so I'm expecting to see more from that side today, above all else. This is as usual our NA lounge, which means that if you have a decent internet connection and probably live anywhere within range of the Atlantic Ocean, you should be able to get a good connection to fight the people currently in the lounge. If you're in the Midwest of the US, you might also get some success if you would like to jump in. With a focus on meter watching, therefore, today we're going to see what people can come up with to use their meter for, other than confirms, I guess. Whereas in DNF your meter will basically just recharge over time, you do have to be a little bit more careful with it here, but since the match goes on and different people end up shifting, you're going to see more of it. So let's play from the perspective of characters who use their meter. Chris, who needs it the least, Iori, who needs it the most. At least in my style. Off to the Hyper Galaxy Ring, therefore.
Yo. Round one. Ready? Go!
The things you can get away with because Chris is short are hard to explain, but they're mostly about getting into positions where your opponent will end up going over your head and then not expecting to be hit for it.
Stand your ground. Ready? Go! Mori! Player 2 wins!
Looks like we've got that same rollback flicker again, but no clear idea as to why it is.
Ready? Go! Winner! 全力の勝負は観客をも盛り上げる。ナイスファイトだ。Select members. Select order. じゃあね、やるか。Select stage.
Now here is a team with some high destructive potential, but it could be difficult. Since if Kyo is their point character versus Yashiro, I feel like Kyo's often at a disadvantage here. He doesn't have as many ways to open up Yashiro that are obvious and mostly has to play a lot more defensive. But it really does come down to whether or not the player has good enough flow of their own to break Omni's defense or not. It looks like our rabbit is going to be playing more offensively today for some reason though, so I guess that evens it out somewhat. Literally, exactly even. Yep, this is almost like, okay, I'm attacking and therefore... yeah, unfortunately, that's the spot. Fortunately, Rock just has to have enough meter to do some explosive damage to get through this round, and then play the next from none. Yashiro can't react to Rock's stuff as easily, and then this'll happen. Bringing us back to even, but it's a type of even that probably shouldn't have been used as a plan from either side. Benimaru can hold Rock off for a bit, but only until he has a specific confirm into metered stuff. Meaning, your better option is usually to go on the offense with Benimaru for no reason specifically other than that maybe he won't ever get that confirm. Because he doesn't usually get it straight out of defense. Meaning you can be a little bit more aggressive. Not necessarily aggressive with the intention of actually like hitting every time, but lockdown is a lot easier against this character than some others. I'm not exactly sure why Rock players don't seem to have the confirm from it, but it's probably related to the way he does the crouch heavy punch and the hitbox of that move. Unfortunately, since Antonov can't keep up the same style of pressure as Benimaru, here we're counting on the idea that Rock is now out of meter, and is not necessarily going to get too much out of it if he's fishing for stuff, for mostly the same reason. You can't fish your way through Antonov with Rock's current style, that as far as I've seen, so you end up playing somewhat defensive and not really having a lot of options. Antonov's long reach and tendency to trade make it difficult, making us end up now at another relatively even matchup, strategically speaking. You'd think that Ashe would have more dominance here, but in general, the main reason he doesn't is because when Antonov rolls from really far away, he can usually get a lot of stuff. So it's, again, the same thing as we keep on talking about in many games recently. If you're facing a zoner, you're not so much trying to get Bulldog in. You move away first, and then after that, you roll or jump or whatever it is that's necessary to get you a position. If you find yourself at the range where you think they've got control of you, that's probably the wrong place to be. But now, the hard part is... Yep, almost had it. Almost had it. Well, with no meter left to do anything crazy with for lockdown, Antonov comes out on top. This game is so heavily about planning your way through your meter usage with your characters that you'll find yourself often trying to come up with strategies for it just at the character select screen. Yep, there you go. Yashiro has a lot more trouble with Kula because Yashiro's moves barely go through anything Kula's defense does, and she'll just uppercut. Your best bet is usually to actually Bulldog, not because she's not a zoner, but more so because it pushes her backward very slowly, and she's not terribly great at defense when she's cornered because making her move safe requires more space. Yashiro faces the same problem though, so Yashiro doesn't want to be close to Kula. He just wants Kula to stop hitting things, and that's going to be really hard to pull off. The Kula player therefore should take back their space whenever they can, and not really try so hard to actually hit with most of their moves. The core plan being both want to kind of stay mid-screen. Yashiro a little bit more interested in pushing Kula to the corner, or getting a corner setup, but it's still going to be hard no matter what happens. She's relatively slippery against Yashiro's particular style of movement and play, forcing a lot more pressure, but then just, I'll just uppercut. Fortunately for Onirabbit, this isn't necessarily the matchup that needs to be won. All he has to do here is not use up too much meter for Yashiro's stuff. And of course bring down as much health as he can. From the Kula side, this matchup is harder, but has really useful ways of being dealt with. She slides under a bunch of stuff that Benimaru wants to do, and that's basically your best bet, almost all of the time. Benimaru therefore often needs to confirm big damage off of whatever hits he can get, and ends up spending a ton of meter. But some control seems to be enough there. Here's a more familiar matchup. Chizuru's not usually better off playing this from far though. Against a particularly patient Benimaru, there's not enough benefit to this, as they both basically can reach full screen, but Chizuru needs to somewhat be like that, trickery, but Benimaru doesn't. He can just do stuff. And once they're too close together, he always has the command grab and she does not. Now, getting this command grab done correctly in the right timing for countering her stuff is still enough of a challenge that you should probably still just not care and move forward. But yeah, the move is not exactly weak. And for a character who often sticks her buttons into other people's throw space, it can be a problem. We've just discussed this one. Benimaru can mostly just keep Rock busy, as in don't let him move too much. It's not necessarily about pressure per se, but the understanding that I'm going to prevent you from... I'm not trying to open you up. I'm just making sure you don't do things. Even with Rock's massive amount of meter here, there's still another character to go, and we've already discussed what happens when Antonov in this space. Benimaru can also do this without spending too much meter, which often means when he does want to just open Rock up, it's just possible. I feel like the better option I've seen Rock players use is to spend less time trying to do this by jumping, and more time trying to do it by perfectly spacing certain attacks that then end up kind of safe. It doesn't absolutely require that you use meter to do them, and therefore you can still push through. But it does not appear to have happened today. If my mic is crackly, please forgive it. I'm told that it needs some fiddling with, or possibly just a new cable. There we go. And therefore there will be some crackles, and I'll try to keep them to a minimum.
Select order. Select stage. Nothing will stop this show. Round one. Ready? Go!
We now see a different style of playing the Chris matchup, but it's slightly less effective to do. A lot more of Chris's command normals and tricky, perfectly spaced, that move you just saw basically, either the light or the heavy version, tends to be more required for this matchup than you might expect. But it looks like we have met the usual KOF issue, and you will not be getting to watch the rest of this match. Though sometimes it does fix itself on the next character, so maybe we'll see something, but you won't get to see Chris and Yashiro face off, unfortunately, so you'll just have to guess who wins, I guess? Fortunately, the requirement here is never too complicated. I just have to find my way back in there. The problem is I didn't get everyone's... Oh no, it's Omni that ended up in top, so sure, here we go. Unfortunately, this still means we're going to be sitting here quietly not getting to watch any matches because you can't. Looks like everyone is back in to get their matches when they come around though, so we'll see in a bit. Stream did start a little late today, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be continuing too much longer beyond the timing that we normally do. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe none. The lounge tends to stay open much longer than that though. I sense a great rift punish in the force. King of Fighters is one of those games that's technically somewhat harder to enjoy without a lot more strategic understanding and practice. Many games it's just like, okay, well, I just basically have to learn my game plan and hope my opponent messes up theirs some amount. That's not really how this game tends to work. You often need to know exactly what your game plan is before you even start. And if you aren't confident that you can execute it, you might as well come up with a secondary one because you're not necessarily going to get far otherwise. So even if you know, for example, that the optimal first character for this side of matchup is a defensive one, I'm not saying that's explicitly what is true here, but I would, for example, play King here first if it were me, but that would also rely on you being able to perform the things required with King to make that a good idea. Oh, they are changing stage. Hopefully they won't have the same problems as we were just seeing. Joe versus Yamazaki is difficult for Joe. Yamazaki can do what he wants. If you've got even the most basic hop game down and can get over Joe's various projectiles, you're mostly looking at smooth sailing the whole way from the Yamazaki side. Because you see, there's little that Joe can do in this matchup that isn't just bravery straight up. And as a point situation, you don't even have enough meter to do crazy stuff. That said, it is quite possible to play this matchup from Joe's perspective as zoning and that style of punish. So we're already seeing at least partially a good adaptation here from DeWolf, just getting to the right spot, do one hurricane upper, and don't go for anything crazy after that. But it's not going to be enough in itself. And Kukri mostly can just do the same sort of thing, especially with that hop available. Understanding where your opponent's concept of spacing, let's call it, betrays them, is really helpful. Being able to dodge out of the correct thing also really helps, but you can see that this isn't just... Well, now we have lots of pressure happening, but still there was a point of you have to actually use meter for this to work. And the spacing created isn't so easy to control from the Yamazaki side compared to Joe. So you do have more options here, but there was some relatively destructive pressure in there, especially in the corner where Yamazaki can just corner guard you if he doesn't feel like going for it. We might get to see some outcome of why King works here. Being able to both slide and jump into Venom Strike helps if you can keep yourself out of the corner. And the way Yamazaki's damage works, it's a little bit easier to control it. Not a lot, but you can definitely find yourself in the correct spacings more often with King if you're focused enough. Characters are being shifted. Possibly in a good way. Yep, there we go. Robert first. Not necessarily because Robert's projectile is going to save us here, but because he can play a very misleading ground game that Yamazaki doesn't necessarily have trouble dealing with, but can take a lot more damage while dealing with. So of the characters, this is the best bet, let's say. Strategically speaking, you're not necessarily going, okay, I'm going to get control of this matchup and beat up this guy with my character's superior options. It's mostly, if Yamazaki messes up, Robert can do more damage. Which means this could easily just be a blow-up in which Robert does nothing, simply because Yamazaki never makes a mistake. Or because Robert makes more. Still, you can see that this isn't like terribly, I'm doing what I want now from the Yamazaki side. Slayton is being much more careful about what exactly happens and what exactly is meaningful in terms of capacity. It's important when you're first getting used to these games to think in that way. When better players than you are showing up to your lounges, to your friend groups or whatever, spend your time learning how to not die. Because you can work on combos on your own time. But with the troublesome Robert out of the way, we now can look at Kronen's options, which are, from my understanding, which has been not very great, practically nothing. this matchup is almost entirely, does the Yamazaki player have good enough reactions? If they do, I think this is practically a blow up. But it's not entirely clear why that is to be. I really need to look into this character's flow more, but that's all I've ever seen so far. He does piddly damage, puts himself in bad situations a lot, and that I would almost call luck. Although it could have been a corner guard setup that I wasn't thinking of because I'm not familiar with the matchup enough to say. Here we have a straight up Garo matchup, more or less. Terry actually handles her better than most characters because he has so many different ways to move his hurt boxes and still manage to knock her out of the air. But you can already see a lot of movement intended primarily to just take less damage. Even to the point of that, guard cancel out of the corner just to make sure that this is not going to get stupid in some way. One thing Janae is good for here though is that she's not really going to give Terry a lot of chances to use that meter if, well, I would say if she doesn't make any mistakes, but it's so hard to make things that you could definitely say are mistakes with this character. She's much more easily beaten with those who have parries and really good anti-airs. Okay, I'm gonna assume that they're gonna keep playing the same characters, and therefore, while I'm not necessarily counterpicking, I at least don't need to try to avoid a problem. A specific one. Okay. Now you'd think that I'm doing this because Shermie has grabs. But that's not the primary reason. It's obviously part of it because I'm not going to go through the whole fight not using them. But it's more so because Shermie doesn't come in from the air and she doesn't rely on projectiles. So of the characters I could choose, she's basically my only one that doesn't do that. I need to neither come in from the air nor projectiles. But unfortunately for that, I have to give up the option to have a really good response to Yamazaki's pressure. Meaning this match is going to be a blow up in some direction. Either I'm going to get knocked down and die, or never get knocked down. Back dashes. Perfectly done. And I missed. Back jump. Okay, and here's pressure now. And that was absolutely a terrible move on my part. Because I expected it to keep going, but my opponent had no reason to keep going there. So they played me perfectly, and obviously this player's judgment is among the best we've seen on our stream so far. Lag. Problematic both sides. Mary actually gets out of Yamazaki's pressure a little better, but this isn't really fair to either of us at this point. 10 rollback frames, huh? Yeah, no idea. Now, in order for this to make sense, I would have had to get past Yamazaki with one of those two, because Geese, while is able to be played very specifically against a very aggressive Yamazaki player, we've got lag and defensive, so the only thing you're going to get out of here is me winning by lag out, which is not cool. There we go, no attacking from the air. Even the longer ones will still be a problem. Can't even tell what's happening anymore. Honestly, a Shatter Strike should probably have been used more in here, but since the entire thing is just a wash, really, it doesn't really matter. Good games either way, though, because mostly that was just lag kicking in after I had been outplayed in the first part of this match, so it's not like I was going to win it. Alright then, Mary, Rock, Bijane.
Select stage. It's about to be a party up in here.
This is something somewhat familiar to our Athena. From the perspective of, I know how to move through this position. In order to beat Mary, you need to spend less time in the air because she will mess with you in various ways. But you also can't spend too much time in the air, on the ground, throwing projectiles. Your better bet is often usually just to teleport. Because if you get too close to Mary, she will do anything she can to mess with you. And Slayton is usually good enough at making you have to deal with pressure, but there you see one of the main issues Mary has. None of her better long-range moves are quick enough to chase a teleport. And because her slicer is explicitly a charge move, you just go to the other side and your opponent would have had to be holding down forward for this to be a good idea. You can even use it as offense because Mary players, I can say this as one, I'm pretty sure we don't like standing still for any length of time whatsoever. It does not play to the character's strengths much at all, and she already has ways to just disregard your offense while she's coming to you. So it's not really like she's particularly incentivized to stay still. But you can play that style of game where you are constantly, not necessarily moving backward, but focusing on the idea that your opponent will come to you and dodging it. And honestly, fortunately, the same thing goes for Isla. Even though she has a lot of moves that could keep Mary at bay, you don't necessarily try to use those as your first option. Isla can spend more time getting off the ground because she can stay there more easily than Athena can. But always remember, this player, this character, benefits the most from trying to get to you. Rock, on the other hand, is slightly different. Isla doesn't necessarily want to be off the ground because she loses a lot of her ability to control his position. But that control does end at a specific point, and when you feel it's about to end, then you jump. Don't think about it, don't try to figure out what you should be doing when you're in the air, just jump. Because otherwise this happens. Now, this is going to happen one way or the other. That's not the thing that you're trying to deal with. It's mainly just that you want to make sure that when your opponent puts you in this sort of position, you aren't feeling like you're supposed to do a specific thing. Doesn't look like we're going to get to watch this match, but I can talk about the general plan anyway. It's similar to Isla, but closer to jump back heavy kick style things. Rock will hit you, but he won't hurt you as much. And because he has to deal with the jump back heavy kick and can't just rush at you, he will also become susceptible to other things. You can even use it as a basic defense against his jumping strategies because he doesn't have a great jump. In fact, he'll miss more often than not. Once you've poked him away from you with the jump back heavy kick, then you probably have access to your main options again. From the Rock side, just don't do anything. Like, just keep on walking forward. Eventually, Chizuru will miss, and Rock punishes Chizuru's misses so powerfully that your better bet is to not specifically try to open up your opponent, but walk them to the corner. But we're kicked out yet again. That's okay, I didn't really need to play that much today. But the question is, who's in charge of it now? There, still Ani. Unfortunately, yet again, I think this means that we get to sit around and not watch a match. So, I'll be back in a bit. We are close to the end of our stream, but I'm not necessarily willing to end the stream in that scenario, and I should probably jump into the list. I won't even know who these two are playing, but in our previous match we did see the possibility of putting King in front, and the main reason you would want to do that is, again, she has so many more ways of dealing with Yamazaki's stuff other than pressure that it's similar to the Shermie matchup. Just do your best to not get knocked down, and when you do get knocked down, block, guard, cancel, do whatever it takes to not be there in that place taking that pressure. Because neutral, you can probably manage. It's not very heavy on the fireballs, but you can definitely get some stuff done. Alright, let's hope for better connection, I guess. But even if it isn't, it doesn't seem to degrade instantly, which means I should have at least a little time, maybe, to see if I can do the Shermie thing. The main problem with playing Shermie in this matchup is that she is always at risk of being knocked down just because the proper way to do this is to walk down. But I felt if I had gone for that without having a good feeling of Slayton's approach to playing Yamazaki, I would possibly just have been destroyed for no reason. For now, I'm going to actually use it though. See, that's what I'm talking about almost. You can just take one hit and then be like, okay, well, that was short. Which side does he end up on when I do this? I think he ends up... okay, yeah. He has better range, in short. And you have to whiff punish things that are much harder to whiff punish because of the longer startup on certain things. It's harder to do it before you've got meter, so you end up shifting out. Okay, so are we going to stay stable this time? Because I can kind of do this. Defensive Yamazaki is a little bit easier for Mary to handle because she gets a lot of free space in neutral. Ah. Should I? Yes. Ah, it didn't kill. With an opponent who's now trying to hit in neutral for whatever reason, it's a little bit easier to do her tricky stuff. And here we have a character with good enough anti-airs that if I could keep my cool on this one, I could probably get through it. Oof. I think I messed up the execution for that, but I'm not absolutely sure, because it might just be that that wins against that style of thing all the time, and I actually had started to do the right move. Fortunately, Geese isn't so bad in this matchup, I can just never remember to do the right thing at the right spacing. I've got a little chance here because there's insufficient meter on my opponent's side to make this simple for them, but not that little. I am so surprised I got that, for once. Jumped out, perfectly done. I should have gone for... what's the punch one do? And that should have been a single Reppuken. Or the super one. But it still worked overall. And I'm a little happy that I got the Raging Storm to work at that timing, because I've been thinking lately that I don't actually know where the startup for that move stops being invincible, and the fact that it worked there gives me a bit more information. It's not the easiest thing to test in this game. You can definitely get a bot, you can definitely get certain setups that tell you this move is invincible, but where exactly on the height of the character the invincibility is can be confusing. So, since Geese doesn't actually crouch to do the move until the end, but if he is invincible until the crouching frames, then you've got a lot more space to do things against air moves than you might otherwise have. Now, this is probably the last on-stream match of the night. And we are in fact probably gonna get more, at least one more chance to see King's potential performance in this matchup.
Get ready for a battle of titans.
But it's not necessarily a matchup against Yamazaki anymore, it's a matchup against a player. So it was still, which is probably why it took DeWolf long enough to make the decision, is it best to go for King first anyway? The answer in this case is yes, because honestly, Joe doesn't get a benefit against Billy to the level where you'd care. Billy goes up straight into the air and has a lot more space he can cover, whereas while Joe and King can both slide, King's slide comes with a lot of other plans and styles of defense that may be easier to handle. Billy's also not terribly damaging, so there's some chance here. Oh, I see why that was a good idea. Mainly you see here, the slide is a really good way to stay near to Billy when you might otherwise be having trouble doing so. Whew, clearly done. See, as you can see here, you're not really overusing the ability to zone the character. You're more so getting to play proper neutral and then having that as an option for those scenarios where you realize that Billy has taken an advantage in position that you don't like. You can at least stop him from taking away your space by throwing out the Venom Strike. And now hopefully Joe has enough power to finish this off, you could say. Because as you're probably about to see, Joe has a little bit of a harder time dealing with Billy's strike positions. Ah, I really thought it was going to work. You can see why not being able to throw that out from the air is kind of going to be a problem. But you could also take up the entire air and solve the problem that way. So with Billy out of the way, King of Dinosaurs enters the building. This is easy. Just punch. Just punch a lot. You're going to die if you stop punching, so punch everything. You also die if you punch everything, but you don't die the same way, which is useful. If you try to zone this character, what will eventually happen is that the player will force you to make a mistake and kill you. Similarly, if you try to beat out his stuff in the way you just saw there, you mostly just hit punch and use it as a giant shield because he has so many slower leaping moves and such little damage from the one thing that beats the counter punch that you're better off just punching. I'm sure that the top level play of that matchup has way better strategy to it, but when you don't know what to do here, your main priority is dealing with that. Just don't get caught in weird randomness, because that's not necessarily unreactable, no more so than any other long-range grappler move in this game. But given the rest of the character's game plan, you're not necessarily going to get a lot out of it. Because you do have a general wish and tendency to get away from King of Dinosaurs. And that requires you to, in many cases, use options that are meant to keep him away from you. And he'll just counter them using that. But with that explosion of sand, I think we have come to the end of stream for the night. The lounge will stay open for quite a bit longer, so join in if you really want to, especially since the instability means that we'll be all flickering around. But it doesn't necessarily seem to be all that laggy consistently, so people might be getting matches. That said, we're closing up for now. There's no content for our streams tomorrow. You can join us on Saturday for our 60 times Dead or Alive 6 Battle Lounge, and on Sunday for Do Not Falter, our DNF Duel content. Monday is, of course, another mishmashing Battle Lounge in Street Fighter V, and we'll try to have the Tuesday Melt and Wednesday Night in Birth next week. So far, I don't think we missed a Feeling Thursday, so obviously we'll be back in 1 week for more King of Fighters 15. You can find all of our bots at 2-mk.org, and whether or not we are streaming, you will be able to check on our Twitter 2_mk_FGC. This has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.